best supplements for fat loss are sleep, protein, fiber, walking, strength training. Seriously, get some fucking sleep.
I feel like so many people want the quick fix and they're like, so what
Mhm.
supplement do I need to take? In my head, I'm like, if you're not mastering the basics and you're still wondering why you're not seeing the results that you want, worry more about trying to get those things
Yeah.
down consistently than about whatever supplement you need to take.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Dr. Joey Munoz Show, your go-to podcast for all things nutrition, health, and fitness. I'm your host, Dr. Joey, Nutrition Sciences Ph.D. and founder of Fit for Life Academy. Just finished recording this episode. It was a wonderful conversation, which I always say, but I do think that all my conversations are wonderful, if I must say. I just had a wonderful conversation with my good friend, Alex Allen, um, the Alex Allen on all social media accounts. I had her on the podcast because she made a really fantastic post on Instagram titled 8 Things I Wish I Knew Before I Started My Fitness Journey. And I went through them. I'm like, this is great. And these are things we should talk about on the podcast. Some of them are related to objective recommendations regarding like fat loss supplements or nutrition related tips. And some of them are more mindset related, like the importance of mental health and making sure you know what your goals are and other cool topics that we'll get into in the episode. That being said, I hope you guys really enjoy this episode. If you guys ever have any feedback on topics that you want me to cover, feel free to reach out to me on social media. I'm always open and receptive to feedback because I want to make sure that the episodes that I'm recording and filming are things that I enjoy talking about, but also things that you enjoy learning about. With that said, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's go ahead and get right into it. What's up, Alex? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. Of
I was going to say, thanks for having me on. I'm excited. And when you messaged me, I was like,
course.
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, you had me on probably what, 2 months ago, around there now? Around
Yeah.
there,
Your
probably.
episode's doing great. People love it.
Yeah? Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had a ton of fun, and I think, you and I clicked well because we have a lot of very similar philosophies when it comes to health and fitness. I was about to say philosophies, and that's not a word. But, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I've been excited to have you on, and I know I reached out to you because you made a specific post on Instagram that I wanna go over
Sure.
on some really, really cool points that you brought up on things that you wish you knew before you started your fitness journey.
Mhm.
And I really like the post because especially I'm thinking about it from my perspective in terms of the content that I make, like,
Mhm.
I usually am providing, like, either really scientific stuff or debunking stuff or,
Yeah.
um, more in-depth details that would be helpful for people that are, like, in the middle of trying to improve overall health and fitness.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really cool to talk about some of these more, like some of these are obviously objective recommendations, some of them are more mindset-related things,
Yeah.
but things that people should just, like, think about to contextualize what they're doing and why they're
Yeah.
so excited to go through that. Before we do that though, and I've been doing this more recently because I've been getting some slack on my,
Okay.
videos. I don't ask people to introduce themselves. So
Oh,
if
that's
you
so
wouldn't
funny.
mind yeah, would you mind giving the audience a little bit of background, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, my name's Alex. I'm an online fitness coach. I've been in the fitness space for a decade now, which I've been coming to terms with since I just turned 30 because I'm like, that's a wild concept. And I'm somebody who, when I started my fitness journey, just started by wanting to lose weight. And then that's what got me into actually wanting to learn more about how to do this sustainably and more joyful way. So I've been on a pretty long journey of gaining and losing 60 pounds twice. And over the past like 8 years or so, been training other people and helping them do it sustainably.
That's super cool. I didn't know
Yeah.
you did that twice.
Yeah. So I gained and lost 60 pounds twice. So the first time I did it, I had gained the freshman 30, which in my pound was 60. What is
Yeah,
it? Freshman 15 actually was what it
yeah.
is. So it was 60 pounds for me. And basically, when I did that, it was because I used to walk a lot in high school and then get to college, and I didn't walk nearly as much because I finally had a car. And I also just ate a lot and just partied a lot and did what a lot of people in college do. And I recognized that I put on a lot of weight, and so I started basically just running because it was free, and eventually got a Groupon class where I started strength training and actually got to meet the fitness manager of the 24-hour fitness in, like, my area, and he basically, like, took me under his wing and, like, taught me a lot about bodybuilding and training, and it
Cool.
was really cool. fell in with some power lifters. And so basically went from like running half marathons to now powerlifting. So my nutritional habits changed a little bit
Yeah.
and ended up putting on another 60 pounds. And so I also struggled with my relationship with food at the time as well. So I really turned to food from an emotional eating standpoint. And then I fell into bodybuilding and I did a bikini competition where I got down to 104 pounds. And it was very eye opening to that neither of the ways that I had lost weight was sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's when I found like Lane Norton and all those other people. I think we kind of like lightly talked about that. And it
Yeah.
helped me a lot with understanding that you don't have to hate your life to be able to maintain like a healthy lifestyle. And so that's kind of the story of losing and gaining it twice.
Yeah. No, I'm really happy that you shared that because it gives a little bit of reference to in terms of like the specific things that we'll talk about with your
Mhm.
recommendations. Because sometimes people are like, who's this person to talk about this? Right. So you've obviously been doing this for a long time. And similar here, I'll turn 30 in a couple
I
months in
didn't
July,
realize I'm older than you.
just by a couple months.
I think it's because you have a baby. And so in my head, I'm like,
Yeah.
he has to be older than me. He has his life more put together than I do.
I definitely don't.
We're all just figuring it out.
Yeah. I similarly gained a ton of weight my freshman year too, and I think everybody does. From a
It's
different perspective,
oh,
I remember, because this is where I was, like, getting into bodybuilding style training, and I've always been naturally pretty skinny and lanky,
mhm.
and so coming into college, I was like, "I'm gonna get huge," and I used to watch these YouTube, people, and they were just like, "Dirty bulk, gallon of milk a day."
Always. I knew that
So,
was what I was going.
yeah, I gained, probably like 40 or 50 pounds my freshman year, easily. And I just remember thinking like, I just gotta eat more.
Always.
It's so funny because I was like, I'm not getting strong quick enough. And thinking back on it now, I was getting strong really quick, like putting on at least 5 pounds on your list on a weekly basis, which I know is not the norm. I remember I had an unlimited meal plan to the meal hall. And
Oh.
before bed, I would go every day, like right before they closed, and I would get because I could get a to-go container. And I would take like a couple slices of pizza and I would get these to go cups. They were probably like 8 or 10 ounces. And I would grab 4 of them and fill them up with chocolate milk. And every day before bed, I would have 4 of those 8 to 10 ounces of chocolate milk and like 2 or 3 slices of pizza. That was like my pre bedtime snack.
Oh my gosh, my
Yeah.
digestion would be that's funny to think when we were younger, how like,
Yeah.
easy it was to eat that much food.
I was extremely active though, because I would lift and I would
Yeah,
play basketball probably
there
like
you go.
2 or 3 hours a day. But
Literally just, like, undoing,
But I would
like,
eat
so
so
much
much. No,
cardio. Yeah.
yeah, I ate so much, but I'm it's funny because we think about it now, it's like, I wouldn't say I had an issue with my relationship with food back then, but it was definitely not from a healthy perspective like my years, right? Like stuffing your
Yeah.
face, and then it's because 'cause you're bulking, and then you gotta cut, and now you're just, like, restricting everything. It's kinda silly.
It's such a funny, like, perspective, though, because it is true where a lot of people just view bodybuilders in such a naturally unhealthy way because they usually like to, like, cut and bulk and do those things, and it's like, if you truly just view it as, like, "I enjoy going through these
Yeah,
phases, and I'm fine with it," there's no problem with it. But when we're, like, doing it to the point of extreme discomfort and,
yeah.
like, it's so different, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I still do those things. I just do it way more, like
Sustainably.
exactly. I would take both extremes very
Mhm.
extremely, like, the bulking
Yeah.
was very extreme. I remember trying to do the gallon of milk a day thing, and I couldn't do it, so I started doing half a gallon of milk a day, and I was just, like, gassy and bloated all the time because I definitely had a
I'm a
little bit
little
of lactose
sensitive.
intolerance that I will not admit. Like, my wife is always like, "You're definitely lactose intolerant." I'm like, "No, I'm not, because I
Feel
love
bad for
choosing
your
yogurt."
wife.
TMI. But then when I would cut, I would do the exact opposite, where it was like intermittent fasting, only eat for
Oh
4
my
hours a day,
gosh.
wake up at 6 in the morning to do fasted cardio, take 2 fat burners, and it was just like, it's so extreme.
Oh gosh, I remember
Um,
taking fat burners. That was great.
yeah, but, I think in many ways, like, those experiences are helpful, right? Because
Yeah.
if it wasn't for those experiences, I wouldn't have the perspective that I have now.
Oh,
So sometimes
100%.
yeah, when I see people going through those things and trying to do those things, I obviously try to encourage them from not doing those things, but at the
Mhm.
same time, I'm like, I did them, and I think that was a big learning experience as well,
Yeah.
so there definitely is some positive that comes out of it.
Oh, for sure. I have this terrible savior complex where I want to save everybody. And then when I see people going through these things, I'm like, you don't have to do this. This isn't the life you have to live. And then I realize, like, Alex, you learned a lot from those.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can do what you can, but then from there, they have to just learn on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully you steer them in the right direction, but
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, if you think at least myself, if I think about, like, what I've learned the most from, it's definitely
Mhm.
stupid mistakes that I've done.
Oh, for sure. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, take some messy action. That is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it, messy action, I like that term.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the 8 things you wish you knew before you started your fitness journey.
Yeah.
I really like these because they're all pretty different. They're not all just related to one topic, but I think they're all fantastic. So we'll just start at the
Thanks.
beginning, we'll go through them, and this first one, honestly, we could probably do an entire episode on just this first one, because I talk to my clients about this all the time, but you worded it perfectly. You said, "You will never hate yourself into a body you love." What do you mean by
Yeah.
that?
I mean that again, like as shared, that was kind of my experience before of how I lost weight both times, and I always did it out of a place of just wanting to get smaller and not liking who I was,
Mhm,
and not really being proud of how I was showing up on a day to day basis, but also just not proud of the body that I saw in the mirror. And I think so many people start out because of that, like because
mhm,
they almost see themselves as disgusting or they see themselves as a disappointment. And it's really, I remember again, like when I went through that time, I got down to 104 pounds and I have so many videos of me like flexing in the mirror, trying to like still get smaller and like suck my stomach in. And I was like, I thought I was still fat. Like I thought that I was still overweight.
yeah,
And so I want people to know that you can love who you are right now, even if it's somebody you want to change, even if like you do have aesthetic goals. Cause I think that's also where it gets really misconstrued because people are like, oh, you're just telling people to be lazy or to do nothing. And I'm like, it's literally the opposite. I am
mhm,
telling people to show up for themselves every single day because they deserve to. They deserve to be well fed. They deserve to have a lot of energy. They deserve to be strong. And if we can
yeah,
shift the conversation to that instead of I saw this one lady who I hate so much because she was like, nobody wants to be the fat mom. And like, did you see that video?
no,
You're so lucky. She went around like a while ago and it was terrible. And she just had this awful video where she's just like, no one wants to be that person. And I'm like, that's, and she's a trainer. And I'm like, shut up. Like, no one wants to hear you say those things because that's rude. And it's the fact that people are out there suggesting that to people. Like, nobody wants to be
yeah,
that person. Or like the whole nothing tastes as good as skinny feels from like Kate
yeah,
Moss
yeah, yeah,
back in
yeah.
the day. And so I just want to change that narrative. And I want people to show up from a place of truly wanting to be the best versions of themselves and understanding that you will change your body and your life as you do that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I wanna emphasize that I think this is equally important for men and women,
Hmm.
because I feel like sometimes when it comes to the body image stuff, people think perhaps it affects women more, and
Hmm.
maybe it does, but it definitely affects men too, right? And
Yeah.
I think this really goes hand in hand with something that I like to talk to my clients about, that, like, losing weight or getting leaner isn't inherently gonna make you happier or feel better about your body either.
Yeah.
Um, you really do need to accept and be comfortable with who you are as a person, and it's like your happiness and self-worth is not determined by your body composition, right? Because
Yeah.
I've been in different places in my fitness journey, as much as I hate that term,
Really? You hate
where
that term?
I'm not hate, it's just so overused, right? It's like
Fair. That's
there's
fair.
no word for it, so we're just like, "Oh, health and fitness journey." Like, I wish there was, like,
That's
a
fair.
word that meant that. But, there have been points in my fitness journey where I've been super, super lean and, like, not really happy with the way my body looked either. And then the opposite too, where I've been like 40 or 50 pounds heavier and not happy with the way my body looked. But then I've also been at places where I've been a little bit heavy and I've been perfectly fine and comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's hard to it's hard the part that I struggle with this is like, how does somebody actually get there,
Mhm.
right? I think it takes a lot of time and work
Yeah.
and understanding that it's like this whole fitness thing is not just about the way you look, and really like enjoying the process and celebrating other things besides just weight loss, right? This is something that I talk to my clients about all the time too. Like they'll check in and they'll be like, "Oh, these past 2 weeks weren't good. Like my weight's been stable." And they haven't missed a workout. They've hit PRs. They've been on point
Yeah.
with the habits that we're working on. They're hitting their daily step goal. I'm like, "Hey, like first off, weight loss is a temporary thing. Like, yes, you want to achieve a certain physique goal, but you're not going to be losing weight the rest of your life because if not, you would disappear, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have like you need to reframe the way you see progress.
Mhm.
And this is something I think that has helped me a ton too. Like reframe the way you see progress as not just weight loss, but like if you have a weight loss goal, that's just one component of progress.
Mhm.
And you should be prioritizing all these other things as well. And I think that's
Mhm.
what really helps because if you want to improve body composition, whatever that means for you, and you only measure your success based off that one metric,
Mhm.
you're gonna be disappointed regularly
Yeah.
because weight fluctuates and you're not going to
Yeah.
make progress every week and all this stuff. But if you focus on performance related metrics as well and adherence to promises that you make to yourself, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm going to eat this many servings of veggies per day. I'm going to hit this step goal. Even if your weight stays stable or it goes up or it goes in the direction that you don't want it to go, but you're really putting in a ton of effort and seeing success with all these other things, it almost minimizes the impact of like, "Oh, I didn't lose weight this week.
Yeah.
I've been killing it with my plan," right? I think that's one thing that really helps my clients reframe the way they think about progress as well.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say in addition to that, one thing I think that's super helpful too is like framing what you're doing in the context of what your goal is at the moment too,
Mm.
right? Because I'm sure you've experienced this with clients who maybe at the moment they're not trying to lose weight and that's not the objective goal. And maybe they're in a gaining phase or they're trying to build muscle or whatnot.
Yeah.
And they still like tie their identity to being leaner, right? It's like, hey, we're not working on that right now, right? Reframe the way you're thinking about this. Like, actually gaining weight is the goal right now. Actually getting stronger is the goal right now. So I think those two things really help a ton. What do you think has helped you improve your overall relationship with the way you look and your body composition?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you said so much because that's exactly what we do with our clients because it's the same thing because it's like people just they get so emotionally attached to the scale and I think
Mhm.
everything you said is actually some of the stuff that's helped me so much with releasing my obsession with always trying to get smaller. And it's interesting because I've been reflecting on this so much lately because I don't really think about how my body looks anymore and I don't really look at myself in the mirror anymore, which is the weirdest thing. Like I obviously like look and see like how my outfit looks and I'm like cool. But I don't sit there and like tear myself apart or I wonder like why do my legs look so big today or why does like this look wrong with me? And it started reflecting on the journey that I've been on. One thing was spending less time around people or online with people who kind of hyper fixate on those things.
Yeah.
That's helped me a lot because I think a lot of people underestimate how much it affects you to be constantly consuming that or to be surrounded by that. And people
Mhm.
are scared to set boundaries with either friends or family.
Yeah.
Like, I love my dad so much. I love him so much. I'm going to pre-frame all of this that I love him. He is a good human. He just grew up in a very different time. And
Yeah.
so we're working on shifting his beliefs right now. But like, I grew up with him commenting on women's bodies. I grew up with him having a a very kind of stereotypical Megan Fox looking woman
Yeah.
on in his garage. And like, I was like, oh, that's what like guys like. I'm confused.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it had to like go back and like look at all of those things that I grew up believing and I had to unlearn it. But then also I stopped looking at the scale so much. Like I think the scale is a useful tool. Like I think that people oftentimes try to demonize it so much because they're scared of what it's going to do. And I'm like, this is my personal opinion, my perspective. You can't let the stuff that scares you control you because
Yeah.
the more you just avoid it, it's not gonna like, you don't have to use it, you don't. But, like, I don't wanna be scared of it forever. I don't wanna
Yeah.
feel paranoid if I'm gonna go step on it and think, "What's gonna happen? Is my world gonna end?"
Yeah.
Why does it have to? And you said something else that I really loved, which was, this is another thing we tell our clients all the time, which is the best way to build your confidence is keep the promises you make to yourself.
Yeah.
People are so quick to look at planning a workout for themselves. Like a non-negotiable for me is like getting my workouts in. And people
Yeah.
are so confused sometimes because they're like, well, you have meetings, you have like client calls, you have all these things. And I'm like, yeah. And I schedule in my workouts because I
Yeah.
deserve that time with myself. But
Yeah.
people are so quick to bail on themselves. Like, if you put in your calendar, why are you going to be like flexible with plans with you when you wouldn't be flexible? Like, I wouldn't have texted you last minute and been like, oh, actually, I don't feel like coming on your podcast anymore. Like, you probably be like, damn, she's rude. But it's like people do that to themselves all the time. Why are you any different? If anything, you should be more of a priority.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's funny. I was just
mhm,
talking to a client about that, and we did a little activity where I asked her to like really time block everything for a week
mhm.
because, like, yeah, health and fitness needs to be a priority. That's something
Yeah,
that is it's difficult to talk about because it takes time and effort, right? Just like
yeah,
everything else. Like people think it's just going to be, hey, I want to do this, and then you just do it, and it doesn't take any
mhm,
time. It's like, yeah, it actually takes a lot of time,
yeah,
but you actually do have the time if you prioritize it correctly, right? And most people, for example, like prioritize their career, which is great. I understand why. And they prioritize time with friends on the weekends, which is great. And they prioritize a million other things, right? And then it's just easy for like their fitness to kind of take the backseat.
mhm,
Um, with this client in particular, she's definitely a workaholic. She works extremely hard, right? She works very long hours every day. And she was just like, oh, just work gets in the way and then I don't go to the gym. I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. Like the gym does not, you can't interfere with it because of work. You need to set time aside. And if your boss or something calls you, it's like, no, like this is your time, right?
yeah,
And she's definitely working a lot more than she needs to as well, because that's
yeah,
just the type of person she is. But we had a tough conversation. It's like, hey, if you actually want to do this, you can't be skipping workouts or missing your daily step goal or not prioritizing your nutrition because you had more work to do and then everything goes to shit because then you're just like not doing the thing that you said you were going to do. And then you feel bad about it, right?
yeah.
Last thing I wanted to touch on here with regards to like you can't hate yourself into what was the exact phrase?
You'll never hate yourself into a body that you love.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think a big part of it too, and maybe this is I don't know from my perspective, maybe more prevalent in younger people.
Mhm.
It's that we're looking for external acceptance, right? And we
Yeah,
think like, hey, when we look a certain away, people are going to like us more, and if people like us more, I'm going to be happier. And that's just like not true, like at all.
yeah,
First off, like people don't like you more or less based off what your body looks like for the most part, right? Obviously, there's outliers of people that are assholes, whatever. But like your friends and family and stuff, like for the most part, they're not going to love you more or less because you're a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So
yeah,
this external acceptance thing is kind of silly. And I think another important part of it is like, I don't know, I feel like people think that having a certain type of body is going to maybe make their overall life happier
mhm,
and they're going to feel happier and it's going to improve everything else. And the truth is that maybe they have a lot of work to do in other areas of their life that are things that are actually going to make them happy.
yeah,
And it's not just about what your body looks like, because if you lose 10 pounds and your whole life is shit, you're still going to feel like shit, right? And maybe it comes down to like relationships, your friends maybe suck, and maybe your career sucks. And there's just a lot of things that you're unhappy about, and you tie your unhappiness to just your body. And that's not necessarily true either, right?
yeah,
I feel like I'm in a position now where I'm the most comfortable, independent of what my body looks. And surprisingly, when I care less about it, I actually think I have better body composition outcomes and like I
yeah,
feel better in my body and everything. And I put way less time and effort into it now than I ever have, even though I still prioritize and put a lot of time and effort into it. It's not something that's on my mind 24/7.
yeah.
And I feel like part of this, it's like holistic. I don't like that word either. Because that word's been hijacked. But
That's fair.
um, you know, I'm happy with my career. I love what I do every day. I'm happy with my family. I'm happy with everything. And I think those things really carry over to how you feel about yourself,
Mhm,
right? And how you feel about yourself physically, but also visually. And then that makes it easier to make healthier choices too. Because sometimes people use food as a coping mechanism.
mhm,
And it really does all like cascade, right? I usually tell people like fitness for me has had a very positive impact on my life and like all the things I do outside of fitness, but also acknowledge that like when things outside of fitness, like family, career, everything is going really well, it also makes it a lot easier to have a more positive relationship with fitness, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
You can you relate to that? Would you say that
Yeah.
that's part of it too?
Yeah, there's actually a lot I wanna unpack on that because I'm gonna go back to the beginning really fast because you
Sure.
mentioned the relationships, like, with family and how people aren't gonna love you more for, like, being a certain size, and I'm gonna offer, like, a slightly different perspective a little bit because I agree with you. One thing I found interesting around, like, the validation is I definitely got way more compliments and recognition when I was my smallest, and
Mhm.
every time I, like, lost weight and was my smallest than I ever did for gaining weight, whether or
Sure.
not it was even how I am now. And so I think sometimes even if it's true that they won't love you less, we can then put that on ourselves where, but this is where I'm getting the validation. This is where I'm
Yeah,
getting the
yeah.
recognition. And so I think it kind of ties into what you were saying and the fact that, like, many times people don't realize that we're just seeking validation. I spent so much of my life believing that I'm never good enough. I'm very type A, very perfectionist, where I'm like, I want to excel at everything that I do. So
Yeah.
I need that validation. And so a lot of that was stuff that I just had to work through and, like, really better understand. And that was part of the reason I'd even turned to food in the first place to, like, basically
Yeah.
like suppress all those things. And so I think that that's just, it's a different perspective. It's not saying anything you said obviously was, like, wrong. I
Yeah.
think that it was just, it's where some people might come from with it. And then, like, hopefully maybe if someone hears that, they can be like, oh, maybe that is me. And so I
Yeah.
need to, like, take a step back. As for the interesting thing about, like, one, I 100% agree that as I got more into fitness, I feel like my confidence got significantly higher. Like, I feel like I was just more proud of who I was as a person because I'm like, this is really cool. I can get really strong and I
Yeah.
can be really good at these things. And then it made me, like, put myself out there more. And I also agree that, like, I ended up surrounding myself with better people. Not always. There's always times where, like, you meet some
Yeah,
people
yeah,
who are a
yeah.
little questionable. But, like, I've been really fortunate where, especially since starting my health and fitness journey, like, I've met a lot of other people who are very dedicated to, like, trying to just be the best versions of themselves.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of people who also still need therapy. That's why I always say,
Yeah.
like, the gym doesn't replace therapy. But I also feel like this is another thing that, like, I remind clients, but also just people in general, which is when we face challenges, it's not like the challenges necessarily are better or easier or not as tough as stuff we've faced before. We just get better at handling
And
them.
handling challenges, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that not just fitness, but, like, the growth that I've had because of health and fitness has helped me better understand because even through a lot of really trying and difficult things, I've continued to be able to show up really strong where, like, even if, like, work is really, really crazy or my relationships are very questionable and crazy or whatever's going on, like, I still make time to go to the gym. I still make
Yeah.
time to show up for myself. And this is an interesting one that I think about way too often also, which is, like, how breakups in, like, movies and stuff have always been deemed as, like, the girl sits in bed and cries and then, like, eats her chocolates and, like, and I know people like that who, like, they go through a breakup and then they're, like, so sad and they're just, like, curled up and they stop taking care of themselves. And then there's also, like, the whole revenge body idea.
Mhm.
And I have learned that, like, for me, when I first dealt with breakups at a very young age, I was very similar where I, like, catastrophized it. I was like, everything's wrong in my life. And it helped. And I realized I was traumatic, but it's fine. Um, we learn. And now as I've gotten older, like, one of the things is whether it's, like, a breakup or it's just something hard in life,
Mhm.
like, taking care of myself in those moments, like, giving myself time to, like, feel my feels and, like, be sad and
Mhm.
eat the ice cream and eat the chocolate is nice. But then also, like, getting outside and going for a walk, still going to the gym, still, like,
Yeah.
reaching out to friends when it's really, really scary and really uncomfortable to tell anybody that anything's wrong. Like, those things I never used to be able to do until I started to build that confidence in myself.
Mhm.
And I think that it's a very powerful transformation. And I think that I agree with everything that you had mentioned of like how it's made
Yeah.
everything better because it makes dealing with those things better.
Yeah. Yeah, it just takes time. The only constant is just continuing to show up.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about the validation, no, I totally agree with you. I don't think you're I so I guess I think what I mentioned, I just phrased incorrectly. You definitely get more external validation, right? You definitely get a more external validation. When you get leaner, whatever, people comment. I think what it is like you realize that that external validation doesn't actually mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Like long term, it validation from random people telling you you look leaner, you look good or whatever. Like it feels good, sure, of course, but it doesn't fix your problem. It
Yeah.
doesn't like it doesn't fundamentally make you happier, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Because if you
Yeah.
have other shit going on, you got to deal with the other shit.
I don't think you
Um,
said anything wrong. By the way,
yeah,
I was more just like bringing that to the
yeah,
table
yeah, no,
as
for sure.
well.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I knew this one was going to be the longest one because this was definitely
It's an
a
important
touchy
one.
subject that a lot of people relate to. Let's go on and move on to step number 2, which you kind of talked a little bit about as well with making
Oh, there
time
we
and
go.
going on a walk, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned walking is wildly underrated.
Yes.
I think this was pretty straightforward, but what do you mean by that?
It is free.
Yeah.
Everyone can do it. Well, not everyone. Most people can do it. And I also said it like on the bottom of it. I said it's one of the easiest, most accessible forms of exercise. Plus, it's great for your mental health. And I meant the fact that so many people make it seem like such a mundane or less than task to just go for a walk outside
Yeah.
and or just walk in general. And I'm like, the
Yeah.
world has made it so easy for us not to walk.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties into some of the things that you were mentioning too, where it's like you have to make time to like get your steps in, go to the gym. And this is something I've had to like unlearn over the past couple years because I used to think, oh, it is really obsessive behavior to like worry about your steps or to like do these things. And I'm like, we live in a society that has made it actually harder for us to be healthy because it's so easy to not be.
Yeah.
And so it's not obsessive unless you're obviously like staring at every 5 seconds. You're like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah.
like we do have to put a little thought into it. But I just think walking it's something that can make your health and fitness significantly better. It's something that can improve your mental well being, like just going outside and like listening to music or even talking to your friends. So I think it has so many health benefits. And our physical therapist, she basically like always says that people don't walk enough. That's like her favorite thing because like all of our clients will like who see her, they're like, oh, my back hurts or this. And she's like, how much do you walk? As
Yeah.
like the first thing. And then they're like, well, and I'm like, there you go. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I wanted to quickly touch on what you mentioned in terms of being obsessive because I really don't like when people try to like make anything seem like you're obsessed with something or try to
hmm
discourage you from being quote unquote obsessed with something.
Yeah.
First and foremost, people have different personalities. I
Yeah.
have an obsessive personality. Like when I like something, I will fucking check it a million
Same.
times. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like when I launched my podcast, I would look at my stats probably like 20
Yeah.
times a day because it's something new, it's exciting, and that's like
Yeah.
I hear about it, it's on my mind all day, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that.
Yeah.
But like
Some
in
people
that
do.
aspect, we can agree it's not obsessive or it's not necessarily inherently bad, but then people talk about, like, tracking your activity or tracking your sleep or tracking every single little workout or caring about your nutrition. It's so obsessive. It's like people just are so quick to judge when you do something different than what they do.
Yep.
I just think it comes down to how does it affect you, right? Does it affect you
Mhm.
negatively? Does it make you have, like, does it affect you negatively psychologically? Does it affect you negatively in your day-to-day life?
Mhm.
The answer is no, then who cares about what people have to say, right?
Yeah.
Like, I really like I know you follow Alex Hormozy as well,
Yeah.
and this is his perspective as well. Like, he hates the word "should," right? People tell
Yeah.
you, "You should do this, you shouldn't do that." It's like, who is to say what you should and shouldn't do? Like,
Yeah.
if something you like doing something and it makes you happy and it's not deterring, like, negatively impacting your life in any way, who cares what people say? Like, if you wanna look at your step count 10 times a day because you're excited about getting your steps in, don't let people demotivate you from doing that.
Yeah.
If your friends tell you that you're being obsessive, just tell them to shut up. Like, seriously, like,
No,
seriously, the
I 100% agree. This was the
yeah,
hardest thing because I 100% agree because I'm the tinfoil hat person. That's how I feel about my opinions because I'm like, people get upset. It's funny because actually Alex Ramosi is the one who initially said this, and my friends like sent me this message. They're like, "Do you still like him?" And I was like, "Yeah, we can have different opinions." Because he was mentioning about people asking why. I don't remember the exact quote, but he was like, "Oh, if people ask you why, like it's an attack or something." And I ask why all of the time. All of the time. Because in my head, I'm like, why is society telling us that these things are normal? And I've learned to be so combative with what society tells us because a lot of what society tells us to do actually isn't great for you. Like going out and getting wasted every single weekend, or like living only on fast food, or like never leaving your couch. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that, and notice how I said the absolute words, so just so no one hears that and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't have fast food." I'm like, "No, I said all the time."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, my whole thing is I'm like the tinfoil hat lady where I 100% agree with you because I'm like, ask yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing because not enough people ever get curious about like, why do you like going out to drink? Why do you like only going out
Yeah.
to eat with friends? What about like spending time with them to go on a walk together or going to get coffee or like doing something different?
Yep.
Didn't mean to
Yeah,
hijack
it's
it.
such a great perspective, and this is going a little bit away from the step thing, but I talked to my wife about this once because her closest friend a couple of her closest friends, like, would only hit her up to go out to a bar and drink, and, like, that's
Mhm,
all they did. That's
mhm.
all they did, and, like, I have obviously, I'm not gonna be hypocritical and say I haven't done that. I used to do that a lot in college. But,
Yeah.
like, all my good friends, like, I hang out with them outside of that and just like, "Hey, just
Mhm.
come over to my house and we can just chill," right? And maybe just
Yeah.
talk, like, watch a movie or whatever, like, hang out outside, go for a walk. And it's funny because, yeah, like, my wife was just like, "That's just what they like to do. That's just what they do." And I'm like, "Yeah, but, like, why? Like, why can't you just hang out with friends outside of, like,
Mhm.
drinking," right? And my wife doesn't even drink, like, we don't drink.
Yeah.
So, 'cause that was something that was bothering her. It's like, "Oh, I don't really hang out with my best friend." It's like, "Why?" It's like, "Oh, they're always going out to drink." I'm like, "Why don't you guys do something outside of that?" And she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's just all she does." It's like, it's maybe not the best friend to have, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it is
Or
important to really reflect on those things because so many things we do are automatic and we just do it because our friends do it. And it's kind of like in the social group that we're in. And I've had this conversation with clients. Like sometimes you need to figure out other friends to hang out with or other things to do or have a conversation with your friends, right?
yeah.
To the step thing. Um, I'm a huge fan of steps. All my clients have
Yeah.
a daily step goal.
Yeah.
I started walking daily when I would watch, do you know Stan Efferding?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to watch his YouTube videos like way, way back in the day. Probably I was still in high school, if not like starting college. And he just would do his 10-minute walks, which is his thing. And he would do his rhino rants because for people that don't know him, like his nickname is the Rhino.
Yeah.
And so he would walk and just like talk about a particular topic. He'd go for a 10-minute walk and he would talk about something and upload it on YouTube. And he would always talk about how like he would go on a 10-minute walk after every meal and it helps with glucose regulation and all these health benefits. And that's kind of where I started getting into it because I'm the type of person like if I do something, I want to know why I'm doing it
Same.
or like the benefits of it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, walking is really good. I'll just go on some short walks. And I started realizing it's very low in terms of energy cost. It's very low in terms of like accessibility cost. You don't need to go for an hour-long walk. You can just go for a 5 or 10-minute walk. It's so beneficial. Everybody wants to start improving their health by doing the hard stuff and saying,
Yeah.
"I'm gonna run for 30 minutes."
Yeah.
And it's like, how about you just, like, at least walk a couple miles a day because you don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I actually rather you walk for an hour or so a day than, like, do really hard cardio for 30 minutes if you're not
Yeah.
doing anything, because to start with, it's just gonna be better. And like you mentioned, it's so good for mental health too. Like, whenever I'm feeling really unproductive with work or I'm feeling like I'm in a rut, I just go for a walk and like
Yeah.
put my headphones on, listen to some music or maybe a podcast. When I come back, I always feel better. So
Yeah.
I'm all with you on that. And for those of you guys that really care about lifting and building muscle, it helps with soreness and it helps,
It does.
yeah, it helps speed up recovery. So if all you care about is getting jacked, walking
It
also helps
still
a ton.
benefits you.
Yeah. Um, I think that's pretty good on that one. Pretty simple one there. Let's talk about the third thing you brought up, which is there isn't one best diet.
Ooh.
And I've talked about this a million times, but maybe we can discuss like where you're coming from. Why is there no such thing as a best diet? Because I feel like that's something everybody is looking for. What's the best diet? What's the best
Yeah.
diet? And then we can talk about some variables that people should consider when, because I actually made a video on this. I'm like,
Oh,
You
really?
can figure out what the best diet is for
Yeah.
you, but there is no such thing as a best diet.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? Let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, I love what you just said because I think that's one thing that gets so in people's heads is what is this person doing? Or what did that person do to lose that weight? And then the second they hear, oh, they did keto, they did like intermittent fasting, like whatever it might be, they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna try that.
Those are
And it's
definitely the 2 most popular.
I feel like for sure that's why they're always those that come to my mind. I'm like, what else
Yeah,
could I say? But the second you have something, oh, we could like throw paleo in there. Like we'll
sure.
just throw the
If
stereotypes
they're
in
in the
there.
cr in the CrossFit world.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. The irony of no carbs for CrossFit competitors,
I
but
mean,
that's a whole other
yeah.
conversation. Uh, and so it's one of those things where people constantly search for best or like the most optimal or like perfect. And they, one, focus so much on what someone else is doing, they don't ask themselves, what is going to work for me? So I
Mhm.
always think that's really important. And then also, a lot of times when people are searching for best, I think sometimes people will stress themselves out to the point of not even starting a diet or not even starting to like try to be better
Yeah,
in some way because they're like, well, I don't know, so I'm just not going to change anything. And it's like, well, respectfully, you're just using it as an excuse right now. Like,
sure.
you're just standing in your own way.
Yeah.
And so I view it as the best diet is the one that isn't going to cause you stress because a
Mm,
lot of people like insist on having these really rigid, strict rules that are really unreasonable that they could not sustain for more than like probably 10 weeks. I'll give it like a long time frame there. But it's like maybe they could. But they probably couldn't sustain it for like a year. And then they wonder why they're not seeing progress. And then they're also wondering why, again, they feel really down about themselves or they hate themselves because they're not able to maintain the results from this really rigid rule.
yeah,
And so I think that more people need to worry less about like what's the best diet and more about like,
yeah.
what could I try that's maybe going to make me feel a little bit better?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good thing to bring up that people look for what's optimal compared to just what's a little bit better than what I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
right? And like, hey, take action now, make some small changes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not gonna be the best. You're gonna continue to reiterate and improve things, and it'll get
Hmm.
better over time, but you need to start. It's the same with business, right? Like,
Yeah.
we just started our membership thing, and I've already gotten some support questions. I'm like, "Damn, I messed that up. I need to fix that." And if I never started, I wouldn't know that, and it would never improve, right? So it's the same
Yeah.
with nutrition. I wanna talk a little bit about this, and I'm not gonna go super in depth on it. And for
Okay.
you guys listening that want to get a little bit more info on this, scroll way back to, like, the beginning episodes, and I have an episode called it's like, "The Fundamentals of a Healthy Diet for Fat Loss," or something like that. Um, it'll give you way more context to what I'm gonna say right now. Because most people,
Okay.
when they think about diet, they think about specific foods. What foods does my diet need to include? And that is just, like, not what matters
Or
with
what
nutrition
can't I
at all.
have?
It's yeah, right, right. It's so far from what people need to focus on.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word rules. I think the way that I like to frame this is like a healthy diet that's optimal for you or that's optimal for anyone should follow certain rules. There are commonalities amongst what a healthy, sustainable diet is for everyone. The thing
Yeah.
is that those commonalities are not the specific foods that you eat or
Mm.
avoid, right? And what I like to tell clients is the diet that's optimal and best for you needs to do three things. One, it needs to meet your nutrient needs. So that means your energy needs and your micronutrient needs, right? You can't be deficient in anything.
Yeah.
And that can look a million different ways because
Yeah.
different foods have different nutritional compositions. And you can be not nutritionally deficient eating a million different ways,
Yeah.
right? So that's rule number one. And those nutrient needs should be specific to what your goal is as well, right? If you're trying to maintain weight, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Rule number two for me is that your diet should help you regulate your hunger and satiety. And this is where we talk about food choices beyond just calories, right? Because we all know that, yeah, you could
It's not
lose weight
just
just
calories
eating
in, because
Snickers.
calories out.
Or you could lose weight just eating Snickers or whatever, but like the downside is you're
Yeah.
going to be hungry as hell, right?
You could be
And
starving.
theoretically, yeah, like let's say Snickers meet all your nutritional needs, which they don't. But even if they did, you're going to be starving. So it's going to be
Yeah.
miserable. It's not going to be super sustainable. So hunger and satiety regulation is important. That's where we talk about things like whole foods, protein, fiber, etc. And then the third rule, and this is where the individualization comes in, is that your diet needs to be enjoyable. If
Yeah.
you can meet those 3 things, your diet meets your nutritional needs, which align with your goals,
Mhm.
diet helps you regulate your hunger and satiety, and your diet is enjoyable to you, that's gonna be a perfect diet for you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of flexibility within those 3 rules. And
Yeah.
that's why it takes so much trial and error. And that's why some people, do really well on something like paleo, right? Because can you eat a paleo style diet and not be deficient in any nutrient? Yeah, you can.
Mhm.
Can it help regulate hunger and satiety? Yeah, because for the most part, it's whole food based. That's pretty good. And 3, do you enjoy it? Yeah, some people definitely enjoy it, right? Some
Mhm.
people, like, can stick to that, and they have no problem. I tend to be one of those people, like, I don't follow a paleo diet, but, like, I enjoy eating those types of foods. I'm good with whole
Yeah.
food, veggies, and I'm fine with it. Some other people aren't, right? And so those are the people that maybe struggle with it more.
Yeah.
But you need to find what works for you within the context of those 3 rules.
Mhm.
And, shameless plug, if you wanna learn more, go check out the other episode.
It's
It's just like a
hey, it's your
40-minute episode
podcast.
of
There's
talking
no
about those things.
it's a shameless plug here. It's your podcast.
Plugging my own podcast within my own
The
podcast.
audacity.
Inception. Anything else you wanted to bring up there? Do you have any, like, stories about, like, um, things with clients or even yourself in terms of, like, finding what's optimal for you and how that's changed over time?
I mean, I think a lot of people are so quick to want to change everything because I'm gonna like we typically start with obviously like a food diary to literally just get an idea of like what are you already eating. And a lot of people will start to do that. And we preface with like, don't change anything. Do not do anything different. We have to know what you're eating. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to criticize you. We just want to know.
And they
And a lot of
still are.
oh no, that's not what I was gonna say. A lot of people naturally auto-regulate. And so they'll be like, "Oh, well, I decided." I guess I could see where technically you could say that they are lying because then they'll like change. And so like we have people who like one of my clients, he really loves like these like really sugary coffee drinks and he also really loves soda. And so when he first started, he had basically like cut those out of the food diary, even though we say like, hey, also include any drinks that also include calories. And after a week, I was like a week after doing it, I was like, what? I feel like there's other things missing from your food
Yeah.
diary. Cause he would like say these little comments about like his coffee or about like a soda. And I would like look at his food diary and I was like, hey, like just double checking. Are you like including any calorie drinks? And he's like, I mean, like when I have them, and I'm like, and he basically, like, confessed that he was like, "I was just trying to, like, have less of them," and he was like, "I was trying to drink, like, all black coffee, or I was trying to drink, like, no soda at all," and I was like, "Hey, let's compromise here. How many of these coffee things are you actually drinking a day?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "I was doing, like, 4." I was like,
Shit.
"Great." I know. I was like,
Probably
"Wow,
worth
okay."
looking at that.
He that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. We're working on a number of things there. Um but I was like, "Hey, like, what if we do 2?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, but I mean, like, I can." I was like, "No, no, let's just do 2." He was like, "Okay." And then with like the sodas, I was like, "Hey, like, what if we switch to diet?" And I know a lot of people. I hopefully people on your podcast aren't gonna freak out hearing that. But I was like,
Yeah, I don't
"What?"
think you will.
But I'm like, "What if we switch to diet?" And he
Yeah.
was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Do you like the taste?" And he's like, and I was like, "Okay, great. Sounds good." And we just compromised on those things, but his natural inclination was to one, feel guilty for having those things, even though we obviously try to convey like, "Hey, there's no reason to feel guilty about any of these foods. We just want to understand." But then two was to just cut them out. Like his instinct was like, do
Yeah.
none of it. And I think that's where it's so important for people to understand that it's like, my inclination isn't for you to just do none of it. It's for you to just do a little bit less. And then it's like, what can we also add in there or what can we swap out? So in that way it can be a little bit more sustainable. So I think that's like the biggest lesson that kind of comes to my mind with like, what's the best diet or how could we naturally make some
Yeah.
adjustments on our own right now, which would be like, instead of viewing what can't I have, be like, okay, maybe where can I make some compromises, but also like what could I swap out that could be just as good, instead of viewing it as this like all or nothing.
Hey guys, some of you may not know that I'm the scientific advisor for a supplement company called Outwork Nutrition. I help with the formulation of new products to help ensure that they're effective and backed by science. Unlike many other supplement companies out there, we don't rely on exaggerated claims or flashy marketing tactics. Instead, we let the science speak for itself. We take pride in formulating products that deliver real results, helping you achieve your fitness goals in a meaningful way. If you're in the market for supplements like protein powder, pre-workout, or recovery products, make sure to check us out at outworknutrition.com. And as a thank you for being an avid listener of this podcast, use code Joey for an exclusive discount at checkout. You can find the link to our website down in the description of this podcast episode. Remember, our goal is to empower you with science-backed supplements that truly make a difference. Choose Outwork Nutrition and elevate your fitness to new heights. Yeah, for sure. It's funny. Yeah, people's inclination is to cut things out completely.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Reducing is a better alternative, but also just replacing is probably even a better alternative in the sense of like, even when it comes to habits, even outside of nutrition, it's like, if you try to stop something cold turkey and you do that thing because of something else, and we always do stuff in response to something else, right? Like whether it's like eating a ton of food because you were sad or whatever it is, like we usually do an action in response to some sort of trigger.
Yeah.
If you try to just like take that out completely, well, then what the hell do you do when the trigger is present?
Happens.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you need to actually replace things, right? And that's why a really common one with clients is snacking at night.
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, I just have really good willpower. I'm just not going to snack at night. It's like, listen, no, you don't. Because I've been doing this for over 10 years and I don't have the willpower to just not snack at night. Like if I have cravings, I'm not just going to be like, oh, I'm not going to snack because that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, right? It might work one day, but it's not going to work. It's like, hey, let's be smart about this and let's replace it. If you have ice cream, maybe let's switch it for a lower calorie ice cream alternative. Or I used to have a client who would come home and when he had a really long work day and it was stressful, he would just like go through the pantry. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. Cause his whole thing was like, hey man, I'm similar type A personality. Like I have a strong will. I'm just not going to do it. And I'm like, well, have you had that thought before? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, why hasn't it worked? And he's like, I don't know. I just go back to my previous behaviors. And he's like, well, but now I have you to hold me accountable. It's like, no, like I actually can't hold you accountable because I'm not in your house, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I can give you recommendations and my recommendation is let's substitute this.
Yeah.
And so what I told him to do is like, when you get home, if you find yourself like about to go through everything in the pantry, take a minute, have 16 ounces of water with protein and have an apple or a piece of fruit, eat that and wait 15 minutes. And then if you still want to go and eat stuff, like go ahead. But like, and I said that knowing that if he has 16 ounces of water with some protein and an apple, even if he snacks, is going to be substantially less. And that little substitution helped him a ton. And this was something he's been struggling with, Alex, for years. And I feel like people really can relate to this. And it's like, why can't I not do this? It's because you do it. Instead of trying to not do it, how about you still do it with something that's going to help you actually move closer to your goals, right? It's the same with diet. Like people go from eating, I don't know, 2,000 calories to 1,000 calories, but they don't make any changes to their food choices. So they just eat half the amount of food. And that goes back to the rule of what I was saying with hunger and satiety regulation. If you just keep your diet the exact same and cut half of the amount of food, are you going to lose weight? Yes. Are you going to keep it off? No, because you're going to be hungry as hell, right? Like you need to be able to substitute that for something else that's going to help with the hunger component. Anyways, anything else you want to mention there before we move on to the next point?
No, I think you covered like a great amount there. So I think that was perfect. Oh,
that was music from your post. So that was your fault.
it was, I didn't even hear it. So that's good. I know. I kept like checking the volume every time I open it. I'm like, don't happen.
Yeah, let me put my volume
Oh,
down.
Christina Aguilera. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
There's worse songs.
Do you like how awkward I am transitioning between sentences and topics?
No, you're good. It's a lengthy post. And also I feel like both of us always want to make sure we're like conveying useful information to people. And so I totally get it.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I just feel like I always like finish saying something. And it's also different when you do podcasts like that are virtual, right? Because I feel like you get so much more nonverbal stuff like when you do a podcast in person.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I stopped talking. Is she going to say something? Do we move on to the next topic? But hopefully it doesn't sound that awkward to you guys listening. And if you guys are listening, now you know the type of thoughts that go through my head.
Like, so he is awkward.
Yeah. Which goes perfectly into the next point.
Stop
Which
overcomplicating it.
Overcomplicating. I thought you said stop overthinking, but those two kind of go hand in hand.
I was going to say.
Stop overcomplicating it and find ways to move that you enjoy. This is something that I need to be better at too with my clients specifically,
Ooh.
because I'm so biased
Ooh.
towards like hypertrophy training,
Yeah.
for a number of reasons, not just for body composition, because I really do think it's such an effective way to train, especially as you age, like into
Yeah.
your 50s and stuff. Like, hey, you don't want issues with bone health, lift weights.
Mhm.
You want better glycemic regulation, lift weights. You want better cognitive health, lift weights. But
Yeah.
you also want to look good, lift weights, right? So I
It
actually
answers
like,
all the questions.
yeah, I'm all for physical activity, right? Like
Yeah.
move your body. It's great. Do something you enjoy. And if that's your entry to fitness, fantastic. If it's dance classes twice a week, great. But I feel like so many people have these body composition goals that they want to
Yep.
achieve. And it's like, maybe it also comes down to, like, finding a way of lifting that you enjoy, but, anyways, I'm gonna stop talking now, and I wanna get your perspective on this.
Well, it's funny because there's a reason I put on that same post, like at the bottom, I was like, strength train 2 to 3 times a week because I 100% agree that not enough people strength train. And I coached Orange Theory when I was like early on in my time. And I like Orange Theory because it does incorporate strength training. Just obviously, there's other things around it that like are a little questionable with stuff. But I think that what happens is one, I think everyone should strength train at least 2 times a week. I think that there's a ton of benefits to it, like everything you just said. I think that it's really easily accessible, just like walking, in the sense that you can resistance train in some way. And even if you have injuries or you have limitations, you can modify a lot. And so I think it is an accessible thing in that sense. Um, but I do think that just because like, I love strength training so
Mhm.
much, like, when I started, I was really fortunate where I, like, worked at Lululemon, and they give you this, like, card every month to basically, like, pay to go to, like, group classes and stuff, and so I got to go to, like, Pilates and Orange Theory and Base Camp and F45, and, I did hot yoga or pole dancing, or, like, I tried all of these things just for, like, the sake of trying it, and
Yeah.
it was so fun. And
Mhm.
I would also still go to the gym all the time. And so that helped me have more understanding and empathy towards the people who don't want to go to the gym 4 to 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm like movement is movement. Like if you're going hiking or you're doing any of those classes that I just
Yeah.
named, I'm pumped for you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we also compromise. Like on my team, like all of my coaches know too, like we still compromise with having you strength train at least like bare minimum 2 times a week. Because I agree that I think that it's something that I don't think it should be completely avoided. And I don't think it
Yeah.
should be like not utilized because like you said, so many people have aesthetic goals and it's really hard for some people to hear, especially if they don't like strength training. They're like, well, but I can do this instead, or I can do this instead. If you have aesthetic goals, those aesthetic goals are likely to be hit much faster
Yeah.
with resistance training.
Yeah. It's funny you brought something up because my only fitness endeavor for the past 13 years has been going to the gym and lifting to get stronger and bigger. Like, that's all I do because I
Yeah.
love it. Like, I
Yeah.
really, really like it, right? Like,
Good.
I to me, going to the gym and lifting weights is my, like, fun time, right? And some people hear that and they think it's crazy, but I love it, right? And I will even sacrifice doing other things because it's gonna affect my lifting because I really like it, right? Like, if, friends ask me to go whatever, do whatever, and I know it's gonna impact my lifting, I'll just say no because to me, like, I don't want it to negatively impact my lifting, and that's not me being obsessive, that's me being
No,
like, I really like
you're
this, right? And I
prioritizing the
really
things that you
prioritize
love.
this. Because some
Yeah.
people are gonna say it's obsessive. I actually forgot to mention something earlier. My cousin recently was like, "You were really obsessed with fitness." And I wanted to tell her no and explain why, and I was like, whatever. Yeah, I'm obsessed. Okay, let's move on."
You
Because
bring up
sometimes
a
it's not worth the energy.
well,
But,
you bring up a good example though, because I was recently in the Caymans and there was like people were skimboarding. And do you know
mhm,
what that is? Yeah. And I was
yep,
like, I in my head, I was like, "I could probably try this," and then, of course, like, it was only guys who were, like, trying it, and so I'm also the person who's like, "Okay, if only guys are trying it, I have to go try it, so we have a girl doing it, so it's fine." It's a whole other thing. But so I go and I try it, and then I end up falling, and you fall on this hard part of
mhm,
sand, like, hard. It ended up hurting my glute, and I really couldn't do legs for, like, probably, like, 5 days. And
Yep.
so it wasn't that long, but even now, I, like, still and this has been, like, 3 weeks now, and I still feel a lot of discomfort with it, and in my head, I was like, "I can never skimboard again because I don't wanna get hurt because I don't wanna miss out on lifting because then I'm gonna cry." So,
Yeah.
I get it to an extent.
Yeah. Well, the other point that I was gonna bring up that you mentioned is that, like, when you were trying all of these other different things, you realized how
Mhm,
fun they were,
mhm.
right? And
You
so
don't
for
have
the
fun
longest
doing the other
time,
things.
I had not tried anything else.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Nope, lifting, that's the only thing I do." And basketball for because I played a lot of basketball, and I love basketball, but I actually don't play basketball because it affects my lifting. Seriously, I
My
don't.
ex was like that, exactly like that. He loved
Because
basketball
yeah,
and just would never but he was like, "No, I just wanna get bigger," and because he's naturally lean, and I was like, "Bro, do the thing that
yeah.
makes you happy."
Well, for me, the issue is that I can play basketball and lift, but I'm too competitive, so every time I play
Oh,
basketball, it's
no.
100% all out. That's the only way I have fun. I can't just go play to have fun. Like, I have fun if I win.
No, it's
So
okay,
I
I'm the
go and I
same
play
way.
really hard. So the issue is I roll my ankle frequently.
Oh,
I strain
yeah.
something frequently because I don't play really often. So when I do, I just play way harder than I should for my fitness level for basketball. And so
Mhm.
I get hurt often. So that's why I just stay away from it. But I was going
Fair.
to bring up
Have
when
you
I was
tried
with
new things?
BioLane, we did it. Sorry, what were we saying?
I was like, "Have you tried new things?"
I was about to tell a story about when I tried a new thing.
So exciting.
So this is probably like a year and a half or 2 years ago now. When I was working with BioLane, we had a company activity and people came here to Tampa and we did one of those spin classes together.
Yeah.
And I was so like, I was like, why are we doing this? We all lift. Like, why can't we all just go to the gym together? I remember thinking that. I was like, this is such a waste of time. We literally everybody on this team likes to lift. Let's go to
Yeah.
the gym and lift some weights. And I don't remember whose idea it was, but anyways, this cycling class was planned. And we did the cycling class, and it was like in the dark with really good music, really good lights, really high energy. And I was like, damn, this is really fun. I can see why people love doing this. I haven't done that again. It's been 2 years.
You're like, "Don't get it misconstrued here, I didn't like it
Yeah.
that much."
But for me, it was just like hard to understand. Not hard to understand, but like, I was like, why don't people like lifting? And why would people like doing anything else besides lifting? And then
I think
it clicked.
women typically, not always, but typically tend to be more community driven than men,
Yes.
and I think that's a big driver for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, no, 100% agree with you. Because to me, like, I like going to the gym with a buddy every once in a while, but I like going by
I
myself,
hate
putting my
lifting with
headphones
other
on, not talking to
people.
anybody, like,
Yeah.
I don't need the community aspect at all. And it's
Yeah.
hard because like I try to be open-minded and see other people's perspectives, but honestly, a lot of the stuff that we think about is based off our own perspective, right? And so for me, and I've changed my mind on this a lot, but we just used to be like, oh, why do people need a group of people? Like, just go to the gym and do your thing. It's like, what do you mean you need a group of people to exercise? Like, that's not the intent of exercise. You're going to exercise to exercise. Go exercise. Because that's
Isn't
the way I
community,
am.
like, one of the major drivers for, like, longevity of life? Like, isn't
Yeah,
that
and
one of the
community is like
major
a huge
pillars?
pillar of my business now too. But
Just saying.
yeah, it's
No,
funny
I
because
get
I
it.
never really understood those things. I used to like think that group based stuff was almost like stupid. Just like it's not an effective workout. Other people are keeping you back, like they're holding you back. Because I used to run circuit classes when I was a personal trainer,
Always.
and it was funny because it was usually like 80% women,
Yeah.
and it tended to be like older women, and they would just like exercise and just chat the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, "You guys aren't fucking working out." Like, I was way younger back then, though.
Well, to be fair, like, I'm similar to you where, like, if I'm gonna do something, I wanna win it. Like, I don't care if
Yeah.
it's a game, I don't care if it's class, like, because again, I was an Orange Theory instructor, and so we'd always do these, like, kind of races in class where,
Mhm.
like, you'd have to, like, we'd wanna win, and I'm competitive, and so I wanna win. So to me, it's not fun just sitting around and chatting, I want to do well. And
Yeah.
so I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think it was just I don't know if it's because, like, I've experienced it so much from group classes myself that I understand why people like it. So I have that, like, that other level of empathy for it, but then myself, I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't my workouts aren't good when I work out with other people. They're
Yeah.
not. People wanna talk, even like a good workout partner. I also get really irritated when a workout partner tells me to go heavier when, like, I
You know
am
what you're
either
doing.
yeah, and I'm like, "Shut up." I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not allowed to work out with certain people anymore.
That's funny. We definitely are very similar in that perspective. Okay, let's move on to point number 5. I actually really
So
like this one,
awkward.
and I wanna hear why you bring this one up. I'm assuming it's probably related to friends, but I definitely wanna get your perspective on this. And you
Oh,
mentioned that you're not a bad person for cutting people out of your life.
yeah.
And I think that goes for areas outside of fitness as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
So where are you coming
100%.
from with that one?
I'm coming from, well, the picture for people who aren't able to see the post, the picture is me holding Ciroc, like a bottle of Ciroc and a Red Bull. I have not drank in like 8 years now. So that
Oh,
is,
cool.
yeah, so it's not a reflection of me whatsoever anymore. But I think that it comes from the place that I still am. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I want everyone to like me. I want to make sure everyone's happy. And I've learned over the years that by trying to make everyone happy, you end up almost
Unha
negating some of your values. And so that you compromise on a lot of things. And I realized, like probably like 4 or 5 years ago, that by doing that, I was very unhappy and I would do things that didn't make me proud of the person that I was.
Mhm,
And you can't blame somebody else for that. It was my choice. It made it significantly harder to have those people in my life because it was
mhm,
harder for me to say no. It was harder for me to set boundaries. And I always thought I was like a bad person for setting boundaries. And that's where I think it's so important to remind people that if people are causing you stress in your life, and again, like this is any area, this is not just health and fitness, but it's like if people are causing you immense stress, also, I'm going to give an unpopular one right now, which is like family. If a lot of people get really defensive at the idea of like cutting out family members, I had to cut out a family member in my life. And we didn't speak for like, I think it was like 6 years. And a lot, again, unpopular thing that people may get mad about, but it's like it was some of the best time of my life because I didn't have to worry about the things that had been causing me stress or been like in a sense actually like really harming my life. And people think that they're really dogmatic about it. Speaking of dogs, this is another example of like boundaries.
Speaking of dogs.
You're going to be like, "Wait a minute. My dog is the cutest little nugget in the whole wide world and I love her more than anything." She when I don't know why, but when she sleeps in my bed, she
Mhm,
wakes up in the middle of the night and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's mom." And she like runs over and licks me in the face and then is just like being really cute and then kind of like goes and lays back down. So she wakes me up and then I can't fall back to sleep for like another 30 or 45 minutes. And I hate it.
mhm,
So this isn't necessarily cutting people out, but this is boundaries. So she is not allowed to sleep in my bed. I lock her out every single night. There's no compromises. And people are like, my dad has always slept with his dog, always. And I was like, I know she's not allowed. And he was like, "That's so mean. She only has so much time with you." And I was like, you know what's mean? When I wake up in the morning exhausted because I didn't sleep well, when I could have just kept her outside. So then I am the mean person because I don't want to take her on the really long walk. I don't want to play with her nearly as much. I'm grouchy. There's other things going on. And so that's where I think it's really important for
yeah.
people to know that like you can set boundaries. You can fully cut people out of your life if they don't respect your boundaries. And you're not a bad person for doing it. It's my TED
Yeah,
Talk.
it's a tough thing to do, and
Yeah.
and, if it makes you feel any better, I don't think you're a bad person for not letting your dog not sleep in your
No
bed.
no one will ever make me feel bad about not letting my dog sleep
'Cause
there, but I appreciate it.
I have a very different perspective on pets, like, I had a dog, not even allowed to get on the bed. That's not true. When he was a puppy, he was, but then, no. And yeah, jokes aside, the pet stuff, I'm like, "No, pets are animals, it's very different than a person."
She is my
But I'm sure
child,
you're gonna
but it's
disagree with me on
fine.
that.
I don't have a child, you do, so maybe if I have a
We actually
kid,
had
like,
to get rid of our dog when we had our baby because he was not getting along with the baby.
oh,
And I
that's
had that
really
dog for over
hard.
6 years, and I was so, so sad.
That's hard.
But he, like, showed his teeth at the baby once, and we're just like,
That's
"Nah, this is it." Because I had a Chihuahua wiener dog mix, and, like, Chihuahuas are just so territorial, so
they really
jealous.
are.
especially when they're a little bit older, it's hard to introduce new people into their life when
Yeah.
they're already like 6 or 7 years old. And so we had the baby and we tried letting the dog around the baby and he just like avoid him at all costs. Like you just walk around him really far around him. And if the
Yeah.
baby got close to him, he would go in a different direction. And then so we started blocking off areas of our house so that the dog wasn't there. And then we're like, this isn't fair because he used to hang out in the living room all day and hang out on the couch. And now he's not even allowed in the living room. And like
Yeah.
we had to just rehome him. But he's with an older family. And I think old people are the best owners for dogs because they have nothing else to do
Yeah.
but besides give the dog 100% attention. And he
If
has
it
a
makes you
sister
feel
now
better,
that
oh,
apparently he gets along
oh,
with.
that's nice. Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. If it makes
Yeah.
you feel better, I 100% support that. I used to like work with humane societies a lot, and I think people rehoming dogs gets a really bad reputation. And if you are not, if it's unsafe for y'all to like have the dog there and it puts you guys in a bad situation, and also if it puts the dog in like a worse situation where they're now
Yeah.
like no longer allowed to have as much freedom or allowed to do these things, but then they have an opportunity to go to a home where they can,
Yeah.
I think you're doing a great thing. So
Yeah,
that's
for
my
sure, and that
validation
was
for
one thing
you.
that made us feel good about it. They shared pictures with us, and he looked really happy, so I was like,
Oh,
"Ah, it's all good."
good.
I do miss my homie, though.
It would be hard. I think that's like
Yeah,
it's the underrated part is people don't realize like it's not like you're doing it because you're like, yeah, F that dog. I don't care. It's like you're literally doing it because you're like, I want them to have a better quality of life. I also want my child to be
yeah,
safe. And like, I don't want to be stressed about like, okay, is the kid going to be okay? Is the dog going to have like time out? And so it's like, this dog is going to have a better quality of life.
yeah. Talking about the cutting people out, actual people, not animals. It's really tough, honestly, and I'm similar to you, like, I feel really bad if I even let somebody down, like, slightly.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, I feel, like, immensely guilty
Hmm.
oftentimes when I shouldn't. Or when it's even, like, not a big deal at all, like, the person's like, "Hey, it's really not a big deal." I'm like, "No, but, like, I shouldn't," and, like, it's this weird
Same.
type of guilt, and, I definitely think it stems from stuff related to childhood stuff, but I've never intentionally just, like, cut somebody out that's not true. I did cut out one person cold turkey, my college roommate, because he just, like, not a good person, and I
Hmm.
was like and we were best friends in high school, like, best friends, and then after college, like, "That's it, we're not friends," but nothing even related to, like, health and fitness. He was just, like I just didn't think he was a good person.
Yeah.
But aside from that, one thing that I have gotten a lot better at, and I think I've always been decently good at, is, like, expressing when I think things are wrong or they don't align with how I feel about a particular thing
Hmm.
because I've I know in my heart that I'm a really good person.
Hmm.
Whatever people want to think is good, whatever. But I know I'm a good person. I know I have good intentions. So when I feel strongly about something, I will share it and not feel bad about it.
Good.
And this is something so my wife is similar in the sense that she has really hard time with confrontation or like
Mhm.
saying something that she knows isn't gonna please somebody,
Yeah.
right? And she's seen me be very, like, dry and cut before, and she's like, "No, you shouldn't do that," and I'm like, "Listen, it's the way I feel, and, like, I feel correct about this," and, like, some
Yeah.
circumstances have been, like, my dad doing stupid shit with my half sister, and, like,
Hmm.
he's my dad, but I'm like, "Listen, this is not how you act as a parent. This is what you have to do."
Yeah.
And her wife is like, "No, no, no, like, don't" I'm like, "No, listen, like, he needs to hear it because
Yeah.
nobody else is gonna tell him like this," and those things are difficult, like, those things are difficult, and sometimes you get the backlash, but I think as long as you are confident that you stand behind what you're saying and you truly feel what you feel, then you shouldn't be
Hmm.
bad for expressing those things.
I think
Because,
that's,
like you mentioned,
sorry.
if you don't and you let it keep happening, then you're the one that ends up feeling bad at the end of the day, and you feel like you should have said something and you didn't.
Mhm.
It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do for sure.
It is. And I think you bring up a really good point because some people may hear like it's okay to cut people out and then just do it. And I
Yeah.
think you bring up a great point of you have to communicate.
Yeah.
Like communication is everything. And a lot of people want to keep the peace and think that that's going to solve everything. And then eventually get to a point where they feel like they have to cut that person out because they're just so overwhelmed by the emotions that they're feeling. But
They
if
never
you
talk.
have, yes,
Yeah.
if you haven't conveyed how you're feeling, why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and actually like had a conversation about it, respectfully, you need to question whether or not you should cut that person out because it's not fair. And it's interesting because I think so many people operate this way because I think communication is something that's so lacking in this world. And especially like now that we have like keyboard warriors who say all these like brave things behind their screens. Meanwhile, I'm like, would you ever have the balls to say that to my face? Probably
I
not.
mean, most of them aren't real people, so
I learned that and I was really upset because I was like, why are there like AI little bots just being mean people? But that's a whole other conversation where I'm like, tinfoil hat. Um, but I think that so many people are scared to disrupt the peace. And ironically enough, this is one of the reasons that like I no longer make everyone happy because I have a tendency to just like say stuff. And like I will be the person who will say the things that you probably don't always want to hear. Am I trying to hurt your feelings? No. Am I ever going to like attack you about it? I'm going to do my best not to. But
yeah.
I'm going to say the things that you probably don't always want to hear because I want the best for you. Do I think I know the best for you? Not always, but I'm going to give a perspective and be thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
And so I get what you're saying about like, you're a good person. And sometimes you just have to like let that lead the way.
Yeah. And most times, like, those are the types of friends that you appreciate the most anyways.
100%.
Yeah.
I don't want people sugarcoating stuff. I want to know how you actually feel. And I want to know if I am being an idiot. Like, tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I think, on the flip side, it's also really important to be receptive to when people tell you things that you don't wanna
Yeah.
hear. That's a really difficult skill to develop. Thankfully, that's something that was instilled in me as a kid, because like, my family does not sugarcoat shit. They just tell you how it is and, like, to an extreme too, like, I think it not in a good way, because like, sometimes they're just, like, definitely not accurate and just mean. But you
There's a
learn
difference.
yeah, there is a difference, but you learn how to deal with those things if that was your experience as a kid, and, like,
Yeah.
it's really, really important to be open and receptive to those
Yeah.
things, to actually appreciate people who tell you stuff that you don't wanna hear.
Hmm.
And again, you have to be able to discern whether they're
Yeah.
being truthful or not, but if you know somebody truly cares about you, you know they're truly a good person, you know they're a smart person, you know they know about the situation that they're talking about, and they say something that maybe you don't fully agree with, it's difficult, but, like, swallow your pride and, like, listen, and maybe you don't take
Hmm.
everything from it, but you know they're not trying to harm you, right?
Yeah.
I just had this situation happen very recently where I was working with this startup company, and they wanted to develop a coaching component to their business.
Hmm.
And neither they or I understood the rigor amount of work that was necessary because neither of us had the experience. Um, and so the position really had to be filled by somebody who was going to put in like more than 40 hours a week. And I talked to him, I was like, listen, I really don't have more than like 10 or 15 hours a week because I'm not going to stop the stuff that I do on my own.
Hmm.
And the person who had hired me was a good friend. And he's not the owner of the company, but essentially had a conversation with the CEO of the company. They were like, we need to find somebody else. And so he came to me. He was like, man, this is a really difficult conversation. I don't know how to start. I don't want this. I don't want that. I'm like, dude, listen, man, you can just tell me, bro. Like, my
Yeah.
feelings are not going to be hurt. And when he told me, I was like, listen, I've been feeling the exact same thing.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, when you do have that conversation, you realize the other person has been feeling that as well.
Yeah.
So it's usually not a surprise when there's a lot of tension and you bring up
No.
the thing of like, people are not oblivious to these things.
No.
But yeah, I want to reiterate that because sometimes like it's really hard to take feedback.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important to be able to take feedback
Yeah.
and just like know like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. They're not attacking you as a person. They're just bringing up one particular thing. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Anyways, without getting too philosophical,
It's like
you said,
mindset's my thing, so I can go a million ways.
yeah. This one's a little bit more objective regarding
Yeah.
fat loss specifically. The best supplements for fat loss are, and then you mention everything that's not a supplement:
Yes.
sleep, protein, fiber, walking, strength training. Seriously, get some fucking sleep.
Yes.
I'm
Should have
sure
throw
this
like stress
comes
management in
from
there.
conversations that you've had with clients or people
Yeah.
who ask you about supplements, right?
Yeah. So like I feel like so many people want the quick fix and they're like, so what
Mhm,
supplement do I need to take? And obviously there's some things out there now that are kind of the magic weight loss pill. But prior to that being as popular, there
mhm,
wasn't like some magic thing that would necessarily like have you reach all of your goals. And a lot of people think they need to throw more money at the problem or they need to just take this and suddenly it's going to fix everything. And in my head, I'm like, not even just in my head, in general, if you're not mastering the basics, and you're still wondering why you're not seeing the results that you want. Worry more about trying to get those things
Yeah.
down consistently than about whatever supplement you need to take. Like, even people will be like, okay, so should I take creatine? And I'm like, I mean, you can, like, that's fine. And then they're like, okay, but I'm like not sleeping, or I'm training 7 days a week. And I'm like, well, that we have some more conversations we got to have first. And so I just think that so many people are quick to look for external support
Sure.
when, for I would say 90% of people, their solutions, I apologize if you can hear my neighbors. Sounds like there's like an
Nope.
earthquake. Oh, that's good. Um, for like 90% of people, a lot of the things that they're hoping to achieve physically will
Mm,
come from just mastering those.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like to put my scientist hat on here.
Uh-oh.
People need to understand the topic or the concept of effect size.
Yeah.
How much of an effect does something have?
Hmm.
Because we tend to think of like, is something effective or not? And it's like, does this work or does this not work? In reality, can fat loss supplements have a slight benefit? Theoretically, yes, because they increase your heart rate and your energy expenditure goes up slightly, and caffeine can be an appetite suppressant. So theoretically, can they aid in fat loss? Yes. How much of an effect can it have? Fucking minimal.
Yeah.
It might help you burn an extra 50 calories, and it might make you fuller for a little bit longer. Like, it's not a big effect at all, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look at the effect size of something like sleep or
Hmm.
physical activity, it significantly outweighs everything else, right? So, like, even if your fat loss supplement is extremely effective and it's really helpful,
Hmm.
you have to think about how much of an effect does it actually have
Yeah.
beyond just like, does it work or does it not work? It's like, yes, it works, but how much,
Hmm.
right? That's like saying, I don't need another example. People understand what I'm saying by that. Sometimes I
It's
say that and I don't even have an example in my head, and then I just like blank.
I've had people message me being like, so like, what are the benefits of me drinking more caffeine during the day? And or like they're like asking about, oh, so I heard that I burn more calories by drinking caffeine. And I'm like, yeah,
A
and
little bit. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, so, and they're like, well, okay, so like, should I be like trying to have more? And I'm like, you're gonna worry more about trying to have more caffeine in your day than just maybe
Yeah.
eating a little bit less or just
Yeah.
moving a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's even the reason I said the sleep one is because I don't know why it has been so normalized to not get sleep. And like, people wear it as like a badge of honor. I only slept 5 hours and like I do fine. And I'm like, that's great for you.
Yeah.
I wonder how much better of a human you would be if you got like 7 to 9, but that's okay. But like, it's so funny to me to like look at the list that we kind of just went over, and the fact that so many people will hear all of that stuff and still be so combative about the idea of like, I'm telling you to just go to the gym a little bit and just walk a little bit and eat on a regular basis and go to bed.
Yeah.
But these things are making you so crazy and obsessive or upset that you would rather not just do those than take a supplement.
Yeah.
So that's my
Yeah. And it adds to like
perspective.
decision fatigue too.
Yeah.
Like you're putting energy into things that like don't move the needle forward.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big one. It's like, hey, remembering to have your supplement in the morning could be remembering to have a well balanced breakfast. And that's going to be more
Yeah.
important. Right. So those little things matter too. And then secondary effects like caffeine, like, hey, if you load up on caffeine, your sleep's going to be shit. And if your
Yeah.
sleep is shit,
That's a
you're going to be way
cycle.
hungrier. So it's a, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So totally with you. Mastering the basics, most important thing for fat loss by far. Most important thing for health and any
Oh,
related
yeah.
goals. Master the basics, really. And then all these other things, can they have some benefit? Sure, but not nearly as much as the fundamentals.
Until you're
Uh,
doing all those things, you haven't earned the
yeah,
right.
except creatine. I think
That's
everybody
fair.
should take creatine.
I like creatine.
Or even if you're doing the other stuff, it's like, just don't think it's going to outweigh the basics, because the basics definitely carry the most weight.
Oh,
So it's like
100%.
maybe the basics carry like 95% of the weight, and maybe the
Yeah.
supplements have like a 5% benefit. So even if you do your supplementation routine perfectly, you're just getting 5% of the benefit. And
Yeah.
if you did like, if even if you did like the basics at 80% and not perfectly, you're significantly outweighing the benefits of having a perfect supplement routine.
Yeah.
Unless your supplements are injectable testosterone. And
Uh,
then,
yeah, I was avoiding any sort of I was like, "Do we wanna go on the injectables?"
yeah,
Yeah, there's a couple things that may actually
yeah.
help, but, that's a whole other
That's a
conversation.
topic for another episode. Actually,
Yeah.
it's a shameless plug again,
Oh,
guys. If
there
you
we
want to learn
go.
about TRT, check out my episode with Dr. Adam Hotchkiss. We have a deep dive on TRT if you want to learn about testosterone and replacement therapy for women as well. That's
Ooh, fun.
not trying to joke at all. If you guys do want to learn about that, check that episode out. It's great. Seventh one, your mental health matters. I think we've touched on this one a lot, but
Yeah.
I definitely want to touch on it because yeah, sometimes we sacrifice mental health and happiness overall for some random goal, and it doesn't really mean much.
That and also a lot of people haven't been taught how to emotionally regulate. And emotional intelligence is something that, in my opinion, is significantly lacking in at least the US from what I can see. Because there's a reason so many people turn to food and even say, like, again, I said this earlier in the episode, and I have a whole episode, like, shameless plug on my podcast. I have a whole episode dedicated to this where I say the gym isn't therapy, it doesn't replace therapy. And it's kind of ironic how a lot of people will go from having a really unhealthy relationship to food to now having a really unhealthy relationship with exercise and then not deal with their stuff. Like
Mm,
there's a reason like a lot of the big gym bros tend to be like a lot of the like teddy bears because a lot of them dealt with a lot of stuff. Like if you talk to any of like the really really big jacked gym dudes, not all of them, but a lot of them were like severely bullied in school
mhm.
or they had a lot of like tough upbringings and they're
Yeah,
so nice because they went through all that stuff.
yeah.
And I think that it's been so normalized to suppress and even what we were talking about with like keeping the peace. So like to me that's where the mental health, I also agree with what you said too because I think that a lot of people will basically make their lives more stressful to like reach their goals. I also think a lot of people will avoid stuff or like not even get curious about why that they do the things that they do. And also not wonder because again, I think maybe it's just because I also come from like my perspective of or like personal experience with poor relationship with food and poor relationship with exercise and all those
Mhm.
things. And then recognizing how much of I used those as a crutch to avoid how I was feeling because it was scary.
Yeah,
And the hardest thing for people to hear is like I tell people all the time, feel your feels. So that's the
yeah.
thing.
No, that's a very different perspective than what I was thinking too. Because I was thinking, like, sometimes people sacrifice so much for a particular
Goal.
goal that doesn't really mean much in the first place.
Yeah.
I think you sacrifice all the things that actually add a lot of joy to your life,
Yeah.
right? And it's hard for me to relate to these things because I definitely don't think I've ever struggled with mental health. Like I've always been a really happy person, really positive, like never really have I had periods of time in my life where I've been really sad? Sure, but like I usually snap out of it. Seriously. So
Yeah.
I think part of it is probably genetics. It's just the way I was brought up. Like things
Which is
tend to not
fine.
bother me much, which is great. I'm really happy
Yeah.
that I'm this way, right? Like I don't want to be sad.
It
But there have been times where I have, especially when I was younger, I would sacrifice so much shit that I actually enjoyed
mhm.
because of, for example, like basketball, right? And like I use the basketball one joking around because I'm actually like fine that I don't do it because I get more joy out of going to the gym. But I would sacrifice things like um, family get-togethers because like I didn't want to eat the food that was there, right? And I didn't
Mhm.
want to feel pressured because my family is definitely going to pressure me because we're Hispanic and they're going to think it's weird if I don't eat, so I'm not going to go. Like those are the thoughts that would go through my head, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh fuck, I missed out on hanging out with my family, and like that would make
Mhm.
me sad. It's
Yeah.
like, and that's obviously an aspect of mental health, right? So
Yeah.
like, hey, if you think of health from a holistic approach, whatever you're doing or working towards should not take away from other aspects of your health.
Yep.
Mental health is an aspect of your health.
Mhm.
So if you're doing this physical thing that is improving your physical health, but it's negatively impacting your mental health, then maybe rethink of the way you're doing the physical thing because you can
Yeah.
definitely positively impact both simultaneously. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I immediately thought when I saw that post, but that's obviously very different than what you meant, or
Well,
slightly different.
Well, and I think it's important to note because like you said, you haven't really experienced it, which is okay. And it's funny because I also think that for whatever reason, it's been what's the word? It's become like a very shiny thing to basically say that you struggle with mental health or like
Yeah.
that you've been depressed or you have anxiety. Like it's like a cool thing for a lot of people to say. And I'm like, I if you really had depression, it's not that fun. So
Yeah.
it's made me quirky and I have trauma and a humor because of it. But I'm like, other than that, and so I think that one, I want to also like validate that like it is okay if you've never struggled with your mental health. And I think that like I love that for people. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
think more people need to know that that's okay because like you don't have to like relate to people for like having those like
Yeah.
sort of thoughts. But I also very much agree with what you said where like that I would argue that that was part of the reason that some of my mental health was worse because
Yeah.
I would be the same way where like I would tell myself I couldn't hang out with friends or I couldn't do certain things. And I think a lot of that understanding what actually matters to you is so important. Like it is such a
Yeah.
critical part of being a human. Doesn't mean you're always going to know or doesn't mean that those things can never change. No, again,
Sure.
like we can't live in absolutes. But if you ask yourself, like, what truly is the most important thing to me right now? Or like, what truly brings me joy? Is it spending time with my family or is it making sure? And also, like, a great example, I just went to my friend's wedding, and at my friend's wedding, somebody was like getting ready for a bodybuilding show. And he literally like brought his prepped meal with him to the wedding. He's eating his food there. And I'm like, and to an outside person, they're like, that is crazy because the food at the wedding was phenomenal. And I would have cried if I had missed it. But also, it's like, he wanted to spend time with his
Yeah.
family and like friends and all these people. And so like he compromised. And so I think a lot of times like learning how to one understand what is the most important thing to you, but then also like can you compromise with it is really powerful.
Yes, I need to unmute myself because baby was
Baby.
crying in the
I
background.
was like, why'd you mute yourself?
Baby was just crying, baby
Baby.
tantrums.
It's okay.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I do think some people try not try, maybe some things are, um, what's the word?
See, it's hard to think of a word for
Like,
that.
it's highlighted a little bit too much with
Yeah.
regard to mental health, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes you're just sad and it's okay to just be sad. Because that's the way that
Yeah.
I thought about it, right? Like, when I have had conversations with friends, and I haven't had many, but, like, with friends that have really dealt with depression, they've been in a
Mhm.
really bad place, and they've shared what they felt. Like, I'm like, "Yeah, I've never remotely even felt any of that."
Yeah.
So then when people are like, "I'm depressed," and it's like, "Are you really? Like, maybe you're just sad." Right? Like,
Yeah.
I've had many situations where I've been really sad, but I
Mhm.
know I'm not depressed because I don't feel like life is meaningless and, like,
Mhm.
I'm not actually really struggling because the things that make me happy still make me happy, right? So, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about this topic. I wanna give my personal perspective and think that people exaggerate things a lot. I don't know if that's true or not. It seems like it is, but I don't know.
That could bring me back to what I was saying about like emotional intelligence. And because again, like a lot of people haven't been taught how to feel their feels or like what
Yeah,
it feels like. And so for some people, it could be that they are potentially like uh, over, they're unclear about how the extreme of how they feel.
sure.
And I say it like that because I've been to a point where I couldn't regulate like my anger or I couldn't regulate my sadness. And it would come out as like a physical thing. Like, even think about like men who like punch a wall when they're really
Mhm,
angry or something. And it can go to either end of the spectrum where somebody does this thing because they don't understand how
mhm.
to deal with the emotions that they currently have.
Yeah,
And so I think that's where the kind of like over exaggeration has come from because so many people, when they get sad, they get really scared of it.
sure.
Like so many people are scared to feel their feelings because they think it's
Yeah,
going to kill them. Because there's a lot like showing that it's like, there's a reason it's called like heartbreak. It's like it feels that way in your
yeah,
body. And so it's just interesting to see how like people have navigated that
yeah,
and used it almost as like a again like a way to like relate to others, which I totally get because like I try my best to like relate to others from things that I've experienced.
yeah.
But you have to learn how to feel your feels in an effective and thoughtful way. Otherwise, like that is where harm happens. And it is a huge reason for a lot of the struggles. Like again, even with like the emotional eating or overtraining or
Yeah.
like again, like self-harm. Like you can go to any extreme for that. But it a lot of times, not always, there are some like genetic components too, but like a lot of times it does stem from a lack of education and understanding of how to actually emotionally regulate.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it maybe too, and again, I don't know about this. This is
You're
not an
good.
expert opinion at all. Because I don't want people who listen to be like, Dr. Joe said blah, 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 blah. It's like,
Ah,
yeah,
it's harder
yeah,
being a doctor. I'd be
yeah,
scared.
it is. Sometimes I jokingly say, so
Uh-oh.
I don't stay up to date with like
Uh-oh.
most of the experts in our field, and
The
everybody I like to follow
audacity.
on social media that I actually like to follow are just like straight jokesters and like stupid stuff where it's like joking around nutrition and like making skits where they're like, it's just funny, right? And I joke with my friends, I'm like, sometimes I wish I didn't have a PhD so I could just act a fool because I feel like it holds me back in some ways.
You could act a fool, but I definitely would be more stressed being like a doctor. So I'd
No,
be
I mean
like,
act a
this
fool in the sense of like,
like
there's
make
this
fun of
one
stuff.
there's this one Spanish guy, and because my native like I speak Spanish, I learned how to speak Spanish before I learned English, so I follow a lot of Spanish accounts. And there's this one guy, this Cuban guy, and I'm Cuban, and he's in the fitness space, and the shit he says is just ridiculous and stupid. But he's just like, I don't eat rice, and I eat chicken, steak, and eggs, and this is why I'm so ripped. And he's like always talking about how ripped he is, just like ripping his shirt off, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do shit like that, but I definitely can't.
I'll like it. I'll engage.
All right.
I'll give you
Maybe I'll
engagement if you do it.
maybe I'll make an alternate account. Make it in Spanish.
If you missed a great opportunity. It's April Fool's Day. You could have definitely done something.
Definitely didn't think about it.
Now just plan. You have a year to plan.
Yeah, I do have a year to plan. I'll probably drop like 10 videos next April Fools.
Just like ripping your shirt off and it's like, rice is overrated. There you go.
His whole thing is he calls his arms machetes,
Oh
and
my
they're just
gosh.
like what's he says? He says my machetes are sharp like on the top and on the bottom. It makes more sense in Spanish and it's way funnier. But he says that in every single video, and I was like, I wish I could have a catchphrase like that, not be judged because I have a PhD.
You should check out my friend. He goes by Nacho Liftbray on online. Have
That's
you,
a
you know,
great
like,
name.
yeah, like, you know, like Nacho Libre? He actually
Yeah.
looks like him.
Okay. I'm gonna
Like,
look him
and
up.
so
I just wrote this
that's his
down.
whole thing. Yeah. So Nacho Liftbray, he's great. There you go.
Okay.
Great
Let's
recommendation.
get to the eighth point.
We'll get there.
And I really like this one. I actually think this is a really good one to summarize, not to summarize, but to close
Close
things up.
out.
The only way to guarantee that you will fail is to stop trying. I feel like this is a cliche phrase that everybody's heard, but it is so
Mhm.
true.
It is. And people are really scared to believe it because they're scared. Like we kind of said very at the very beginning, take messy action. Like people are
Yeah.
so scared of doing things wrong. Again, type A, perfectionist. I hate doing things wrong. I do. I will admit that. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I have learned to get better at taking mistakes as learning opportunities. And
Yeah.
like the only way to start doing that is by doing it. Like you
Yeah.
and it's interesting. I had my friend Jordan on my podcast and she's a therapist. She like specifically focuses on like attachment theory and stuff. But we talked a lot about the fact that so many people will try to wait to do something until like they have like the perfect moment or until like things are great. And then they think they're like working on themselves in the meantime. But then the second they start, they're now exposed to the triggers that they had like thought that they had worked through. And then they're suddenly like, I don't know how to handle this, but I thought I did all this work. And it's like, well, yeah, you never had to actually deal with the issues. So like deal with your
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you can take that phrase very literally.
Yeah.
In the sense like you haven't failed unless you decide to give up.
Yep.
Like just don't decide to give up.
Yeah.
Even if you're not doing things to the capacity that you want to do them.
Mhm.
Maybe if you're doing things in a slightly different way than what's optimal.
Mhm.
Like as long as you're still trying, you're still in the race. And trying is what matters most, really. And when I say trying, I mean like actually trying, right?
Yeah.
Because when people say I'm trying, it's like, no, you're not trying. Like, uh, what's my favorite one? It's like
Oh no.
I have clients that'll say things like, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to go to sleep or to get in bed before 10 p.m." It's like, what does it actually mean? Like, how do you try to get into bed? You either get in bed or you don't get in bed, right? Like,
Yeah.
so some things like quite literally you actually have to do because and it's so funny. I always remember this story when I think of this phrase because I used to take the public bus home after school in high school, and there was this homeless guy, and I'll never forget him, like the wisest homeless person I've ever met. I don't remember how we got into the conversation, but he was like, "People don't try to do things. You either do things or you don't do them." And I was like, "What does this guy mean?" And I remember like not understanding. I was like, "This homeless guy is teaching me a life lesson right here." And he like, not a good analogy, but he grabbed a paper and he was like, "Try to grab this." And I don't remember exactly how it went, but I was like trying to grab it. What I was like, See, you either," and I forget the exact example. I think I like grabbed it and he was like, "Yeah, you didn't try, you grabbed it." And now he goes, "Try to grab it, but don't actually grab it." And I was like, "I don't know what to do." He's like, "Exactly, because it's not whether you try or you don't try. You actually do or you don't." And I was like, "Oh my god, this guy's a genius."
I love
But
that it did turn into something great.
yeah, but all jokes aside, like there are some things that you actually just gotta do, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm trying to go to bed earlier. It's like, how are you actually trying? Because
yeah,
if you're trying, like you're just getting into bed earlier, right? But
yeah.
aside from that, it's funny because people when they do encounter struggle, it's like fight or flight. I don't want to do this anymore. But in reality, you don't have to do it the way you're doing it, or maybe not to the same capacity you're doing it,
Mhm,
right? I talk to my clients about this with regarding fitness. Like there are times
mhm.
like, hey, like you and I, like fitness is our life, it's our career.
Yeah.
Most of the people we work with, it's not.
Nope.
And clients will be like, "Man, I have a really busy season with work. It's like I can't get to the gym 4 times a week." It's okay, just go twice, right?
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, I never even thought about that. I thought I had to go 4 times." Like, "No, just go twice." It's
Mhm.
like, not going at all, you're quitting. Don't quit. Just
Yeah.
do it a little bit less, right? And you're still in the race and you're still making progress, maybe a little bit slower, but it's all good. I think it's so important. It's like, yeah, just don't give up. Just do it maybe at a slower pace. If there are difficult things that come up, everybody has difficult things that come up. I think that's really important to understand too, because people think that like something difficult is the end of the world,
Yeah.
or they think that like they can't do things if there are difficult times. Like, nah, difficult times come up like really maybe once a month if you think about it, right? Something happens every month where it's like you don't
Yeah.
have time, or something happened, or you're stressed, or whatever. And again, just don't give up. It doesn't have to be this to the same capacity. You can just make progress a little bit slower by doing it a little bit less than what you currently are.
Yeah. I have 2 clients who just broke their wrists, like, literally 2 happened to break
Uh,
their wrists within the same, like, span of 2 weeks, and I was like, "How does this happen?" And both of them were like, "Okay, cool. What do I need to do? Like, what can we do
yeah,
at the
it's cool.
gym?" And they were so excited. And then we had another client who had,
Also
what
broke
is
their wrist.
no, oh my gosh, I would think I was such bad luck if that was the case. No. She, like, had something going on with her foot,
Okay.
and I think she was, like, had plantar fasciitis, and because she's with my assistant coach, so I was in the loop of what was going on, but she was like, "Yeah, her foot's acting up." She, like, emailed me, and she was like, "I need to take a break because I can't do anything." And I, like, reached out to her coach, and I was like, "Hey, like, what's going on?" And we, like, talk about it, and she's like, "She can definitely do stuff. We just need to figure it out." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Let's hop on a call." We hop on a call. She's really excited about this idea. She's like, "Yeah, it's perfect." She goes to her doctor, and her doctor's like, "You can't work out because like of your foot." And she's like, "My doctor told me I can't work out." And we're like, "You can. It like just will do things that don't involve your foot."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Nope, I need to pause. I can't right now." And we're like, if you're really gonna say that, then that's fine, but, like, there are other things you can do to continue to make progress, and she's like, "I just feel so defeated because every time I'm starting to make progress, these things happen." And I'm like, "These things aren't gonna stop happening,
Yep.
ever." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"They may just look a little bit different every time, but
Yeah.
right now you are quite literally choosing to stop
Yeah.
instead of, like, viewing this as, like, a stop sign that you can eventually, like, go through." It's like, you're like, "Nope, nope, I have to turn around, I gotta go home, it's all over." And
Yep.
it's like, no, that's not how it works. So I think that's a really important reminder because you can take people who have similar situations. I wish the broken wrist story was a little different where like one person did that and the other didn't, but we have broken wrist and then foot. But yeah, it's like you can have stuff that's similar that is limiting what you're able to do. It doesn't mean you can't do anything.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I recently, for the first time ever, had to just fire a client, and it was
Ooh.
tough. Uh, and by fire, I was like, "Listen, I'm just gonna give
No,
you a
no, yeah.
refund and let's go our own ways because I
Yeah.
just don't think it's a good fit and I don't think you're in the right place for coaching at the moment." And it was for similar reason, just like for maybe a month straight, every week something came up where like they couldn't do any of it and they just like want pause a program, pause a program, pause a program. Like, hey, this is not the way it works. Like, you actually benefit more from coaching when things are difficult. And like, I'm here to help you navigate these things. First, it was like, I'm in Australia for 2 weeks for work. It's like, okay, you're somewhere for 2 weeks. Like, you can do stuff and you still have
Yeah.
to eat. Like, you can still work on these things. Like, no, I'm not able to because of work. Okay, whatever. Then something else and something else and something else. And as a coach, sometimes that can be exhausting too.
Yeah.
And I've also learned, when we were talking about like boundaries earlier in my career too, I would have been like, no, I'll work with you and we'll do this and we'll pause or whatever. And this is the
Yeah.
first time where I was like, listen, I don't need to deal with this. And this is nothing against this person. I just like don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
And I'd rather just give you a refund and we go our merry way. Like we're both happy.
Yeah.
So I just dealt with that recently and it was tough, but
Uh,
it is what it
yeah.
is. It's all good.
Yeah, it's hard, and especially because you were saying earlier, it's
Yeah.
like you really care about what you do, and like I'm the same way. Like
Yeah.
I want people to succeed, I want people to be happy, and like sometimes I don't want to feel like I care more about my clients' goals than they do, though. And
Exactly.
yeah, I get
That's a
that.
great way of putting it, yeah. And I've always been all about giving the same amount of energy that a client gives. Because let's be
Yeah,
honest, like, there are clients that you put a little bit more focus on than others, and it's usually because of the amount of energy and focus that they're putting in, right? And usually when
yeah,
I first start working with a client, like, if they're struggling or I can tell that they're having a hard time, maybe if they're not putting a lot of energy into it, I'll put more energy into it to try to get them to get there.
yeah,
But some people just aren't ready, like, that's okay, right? Because you also do have to be in a place where you're ready to make a change, and that's
yeah.
difficult. Anyways, Alex, we've been chatting this is the longest episode I've ever recorded.
I saw that. I was like, oh no, it's been an hour
Yeah,
45.
it's all good. Um, I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been a great episode. I'm happy to excited to launch this one, probably in about 3 weeks.
Cool.
Do you mind letting people know where they can find you, where they can connect with you?
Do I mind? No. You guys can find me on Instagram, TikTok, I think YouTube as well, under the Alex Allen. Um, those are the main places you're gonna find me. And my
Sweet, and it's
podcast, Born to Thrive, he's been on it.
sweet. Yeah, as always, guys, the links are gonna be in the description. I was gonna say jokingly, nobody's allowed to give shameless plugs on my podcast. Only I can plug my own podcast in my own podcast.
I plugged the episode that you're on, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of counts.
My bad.
Um, all jokes aside, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. All I ask of you, which I ask every week, so I sound silly saying this, is if you enjoyed the episode and you're a regular listener, rate the podcast and leave a review. Helps me a ton. And it only takes a second on your end, and it helps me reach more people and become the richest man on earth. Peace, guys. Catch you guys next week.